The first warning came quietly, disguised as a fluctuation in background radiation that most civilizations would have ignored. Human senses did not. Deep beneath the Pacific, a race older than any living commander registered the anomaly and passed it along without comment or alarm. Data flowed through hardened lines into cold rooms filled with people who had learned long ago that panic wasted time. Admiral Jonathan Hale watched the hologram resolve above the table. Lines became vectors. Vectors became intent. "So it begins," he said, not to anyone in particular. Across from him, Dr. Elena Vargas adjusted her glasses and rotated the projection with a precise flick of her fingers. The alien fleet was elegant in its symmetry, hundreds of vessels moving as if a single mind guided them, each trajectory calculated to perfection. "They are not probing," she said. "They are positioning." Hale nodded. He had seen this shape before, in declassified archives and war colleges that no longer existed. Different species. Same assumption. Around the table sat men and women with gray in their hair and steadiness in their hands. Veterans of conflicts that had never reached the history books. People who understood that survival favored those who prepared long before the first shot was fired. "They didn't respond to our last transmission," said Commander Robertshaw, his voice even. "No acknowledgement. No counterproposal." "They don't intend to," Vargas replied. "Their species profile suggests total confidence in overwhelming force. Negotiation, to them, is something offered after victory." Hale allowed himself a thin smile. "Then they've already misunderstood us." Above them, the hologram zoomed outward, showing the Sol system as the alien fleet would see it. Sparse defenses. Limited forward assets. A civilization that, on the surface, appeared unprepared for what was coming. What the projection did not show were the redundancies buried beneath asteroids, the dormant platforms disguised as debris, or the logistics webs woven quietly over decades. Humanity had learned, painfully and repeatedly, that the most dangerous threats were the ones that announced themselves with confidence. In a distant sector of space, Supreme Strategist Korek observed the same system with very different eyes. The Vacuum Command Chamber was a cathedral of steel and bone, designed to impress both allies and enemies. To Korek, it was simply efficient. "Confirm target classification," he ordered. A subordinate responded immediately. "Species designation, human. Origin world within tolerable gravity parameters. Atmospheric composition non-lethal. Infrastructure dispersed but technologically inferior." Korek's mandibles flexed in mild satisfaction. "Deathworld survivors do not arise from comfort," he said. "They arise from necessity. This species has known neither." The fleet continued its advance, weapons powered button fired. There was no need to rush. The humans would see the armadas soon enough and surrender, as others had. Back on Earth, the first public detection triggered a cascade of reactions. Markets trembled. Networks filled with speculation. Politicians spoke in careful tones about vigilance and unity. None of them were in the room beneath the Pacific. Hale leaned forward, hands clasped. "We proceed with Phase 1. No one asked what Phase 2 was. They all knew it existed, and that it would remain unused if humanity failed here. Hours later, the human response reached the Vacuum fleet. A single transmission, unencrypted and unarmed. Korek listened as the translation resolved. "This is the United Human Council," the message said. "We acknowledge your presence. We request immediate dialogue to prevent unnecessary loss of life." A ripple of restrained amusement passed through the Vacuum Command staff. "They ask," one officer observed, "as if they have leverage." Korek silenced him with a gesture. "Transmit our reply." The response was brief. "Surrender your defensive capabilities and submit to occupation. Compliance will be met with efficiency." He expected fear, silence, perhaps desperate counteroffers. Instead, there was a pause, long enough to register, short enough to be deliberate. Then a second human message arrived. "Request noted," it said. "We decline." Korek's amusement faded, replaced by curiosity. They refuse, he said. On what basis? The answer came not in words, but in motion. Across the outer edges of the Sol system, objects began to move. Not ships, at least, not at first glance. Asteroids shifted subtly, altering trajectories by margins too small to matter in conventional warfare. Too small, Korek thought. He turned back to his tactical display just as a junior analyst spoke, confusion edging into his voice. Strategist, our predictive models are adjusting. The system's mass distribution is changing. Korek frowned. Clarify. Their environment, the analyst said slowly, is becoming a variable. Beneath the Pacific, Hale watched the same data with calm satisfaction. Now, he said, they are paying attention. Humanity had not fired a single shot. It had not revealed a single weapon. But the battle had already begun, not with force, but with understanding. And for the first time since leaving their own brutal worlds behind, the Vakun felt something unfamiliar tighten in their calculations. Uncertainty. Uncertainty spread through the Vakun command lattice like a contaminant. Supreme Strategist Korek stood motionless as streams of updated data scrolled across his display. The Sol system no longer behaved as it should. Orbital pods wavered by fractions that defied prediction, gravity wells deepened and softened in places that made no natural sense, and background noise cluttered sensors with static patterns that looked uncomfortably intentional. This is environmental manipulation, reported the senior analyst. Crude in appearance, but coordinated. Korek's mandibles tightened. Explain how a non-death world species achieves this without dedicated war platforms. The analyst hesitated. They may not be using platforms at all. The changes are distributed. Civilian-grade masses, reproposed. That earned a low murmur from the chamber. Civilian assets were irrelevant in proper warfare. That was doctrine. Korek dismissed the unease. Adapt the firing solutions. Increase redundancy. Yes, strategist. The first Vakun test volley launched minutes later. Energy lances cut through space with flawless timing, aimed at what human models suggested were key sensor nodes. None of them struck true. Several beams curved just enough to miss, distorted by localized gravity fluctuations. Others dissipated prematurely, their trajectories disrupted by particulate clouds that had not existed hours before. On Earth, Dr. Elena Vargas exhaled slowly. They corrected faster than expected, she said. Good. That means they are still thinking in straight lines. Admiral Hale didn't look away from the display. And we're not. Commander Shaw leaned back slightly. Civilian shipping lanes are reporting compliance. Automated tugs are in position. Vargas nodded. We don't need to outgun them. We need to outthink their assumptions. The next human transmission went out, not to the Vakun, but internally. Millions of autonomous systems adjusted routines by margins invisible to the public. Mining drones altered excavation patterns. Solar collectors shifted orientation. Old satellites long written off were quietly awakened. To the average observer, nothing changed. To the Vakun, the Sol system began to feel hostile. Korek studied the tactical overlay with growing irritation. His fleet was still dominant. His ships still superior. Yet every calculation now carried a margin of error that refused to shrink. Launch reconnaissance craft, he ordered. Map the anomalies directly. The scouts accelerated forward, sleek and aggressive. One by one, their feeds began to degrade. No weapons impact detected, an officer reported. Loss appears mechanical. Another feed blinked out. They are flying through debris fields that weren't there, said a junior tactician. Micro-collisions. Repetitive. Almost patterned. Korek stared at the data. They are weaponizing clutter. The concept was absurd. And yet, the results were undeniable. Back beneath the Pacific, Hale allowed himself a brief glance around the room. No one celebrated. This was not victory. It was validation. They see the board now, he said. But they still think they are the only ones allowed to play. Vargas brought up a new projection. Alien fleet cohesion remains high, but command latency is increasing. They weren't built for ambiguity. Shaw smiled faintly. Most bullies aren't. The Vacuum response came swiftly and brutally. The fleet tightened formation, overlapping shields and recalibrating weapons to brute force through the chaos. Several outer human installations were struck, annihilated before evacuation protocols could complete. Civilian casualties were minimal, but not zero. The room beneath the Pacific went silent. Hale closed his eyes for a single second, then opened them. Mark the losses. Honor them later. Vargas met his gaze. Phase 2. He shook his head. Not yet. Let them believe this was a mistake. Let them think we're desperate. Another human message was sent, calm and restrained. We acknowledge your fire. We repeat our request for dialogue. Karek received the transmission, with visible disdain. They persist, he said. Even now. He authorized the next maneuver without hesitation. A deep push into the inner system. Decisive force. End the performance. As the fleet advanced, the system responded. Asteroids shifted again, this time not subtly. Power grids across multiple bodies surged in coordinated pulses. The background radiation that had begun all this spiked sharply, then stabilized into a rhythm. An analyst spoke softly, almost unwilling to voice the conclusion. Strategist, the humans aren't reacting to us. Karek turned slowly. Explain. They're shaping the battle space, the analyst said. They did it before we arrived. They are doing it now. We're not the trigger. Karek looked at the Sol system anew. Not as prey, but as a trap. Far away, Hale watched the same realization bloom across alien channels. Good, he murmured. They've noticed the walls. The Sol system had not become a death world. It had become something far worse. A thinking one. Supreme strategist Karek had commanded fleets across vacuum storms, stellar shear zones, and gravity wells that tore lesser ships apart. None of those environments had ever changed its behavior in response to his presence. The Sol system did. As the Vacuum fleet pushed inward, navigation certainty decayed. Not catastrophically, nothing so obvious, but persistently. Every solution required adjustment. Every adjustment introduced delay. And delay, Karek knew, was the enemy of doctrine. Reassert command synchronization, he ordered. Full lattice cohesion. Yes, strategist. The fleet complied, tightening into a formation optimized for decisive assault. Shields overlapped. Fire control networks merged. By all traditional measures, it was perfect. That was when the humans struck, without firing. Across the fleet, long-dormant warning indicators flickered to life. Minor alerts at first. Thermal variance within acceptable tolerances. Sensor drift attributed to background noise. Then communications lagged. Not silence. Something was. Messages arrived intact but late, arriving out of sequence with their confirmations. Orders were obeyed, but fractions of a second apart. For most species, such latency meant nothing. For a force built on synchronized perfection, it was corrosive. Isolate the source, Karek snapped. We cannot, replied the system's director. There is no single source. The interference is emergent. On Earth, Dr. Elena Vargas watched alien telemetry with professional fascination. They centralized everything, she said. Brilliant, really. Fast. Elegant. Admiral Hale folded his arms. And brittle. Commander Shaw tapped the display. They are compensating by tightening control. More automation. Less discretion. Vargas nodded. Exactly what we want. Humanity had learned long ago that rigid systems broke under pressure. Their own history was written in failures of overconfidence, financial, political, military. Each collapse had left scars and lessons. The Vacuum had scars too. They had simply learned the wrong lessons from them. In the outer reaches of Sol, a Vakun cruiser drifted slightly out of alignment. Its correction thrusters fired a heartbeat late, compensating harder than necessary. The ship's shields flared as they absorbed stress never intended to exist. Nothing exploded, but stress accumulated. "Strategist," said an officer carefully, "localized systems fatigue is increasing fleet-wide." Karek stared at the projection. "From what cause?" "We cannot isolate it. Each instance appears minor. Collectively." "They are not," Karek finished. For the first time, he felt irritation sharpen into something closer to concern. Another human transmission arrived. Calm. Measured. "Your fleet performance is degrading," it said. "This outcome is avoidable." Some officers hissed in anger. Others scoffed. Karek did neither. He studied the message, then the system. "They speak as if they planned this," he said quietly. "They are posturing," an aide insisted. "Their earlier losses were calculated," Karek interrupted. "No species bleeds that precisely by accident." Back beneath the Pacific, Hale confirmed casualty updates with a steady hand. The losses stung, but they had achieved their purpose. "They needed to believe they were hurting us," he said. "Pain buys credibility." Vargas shifted the display. "We're entering the next window. Their predictive models are diverging." Shaw raised an eyebrow. "Enough." "Enough to force human judgment," Vargas replied, "which they can't simulate." In the Vakun fleet, a junior tactician spoke up, voice tight. "Strategist, we are observing autonomous human responses, not command-driven, independent actions across the system." Karek's eyes narrowed. "They allow subordinates discretion." "Yes." "Under active invasion." "Yes." Silence followed. Among the Vakun, authority flowed downward in absolute chains. Initiative was a risk reserved for command. It ensured order. It ensured control. It had never prepared them for an enemy who trusted their people. As the fleet advanced further, that trust manifested in unexpected ways. Small human craft darted into engagement ranges, not to attack, but to provoke. They forced targeting decisions, then vanished behind shifting debris and gravitational distortions. Each encounter demanded attention. Attention fragmented. Fleet cohesion slipped another fraction. Karek watched as a firing solution failed not because of error, but because three separate subsystems resolved the same problem differently. "They are forcing choice," he realized aloud. "Yes, strategist," the analyst said. "And choice creates inconsistency." For the first time in generations, a Vakun fleet was not losing to superior force. It was losing to superior understanding. On Earth, Vargas allowed herself a rare smile. "They are beginning to see us." Hale nodded once. "Good. That means the next lesson will stick." A new anomaly rippled across the Sol system. Not physical this time. Informational. Data streams that should have been independent began subtly reinforcing one another, nudging alien models toward conclusions that felt correct and were catastrophically wrong. Karek felt it then. Not fear. Not yet. Doubt. "Pull back," an aide suggested carefully. "Reassess." Karek hesitated. Retreat preserved fleets. But it conceded initiative. And conceding initiative to a species that fought like this felt dangerous. Before he could decide, another report arrived. "Strategist," the analyst said, voice low. "Our models are no longer converging." Karek stared at the Sol system. The humans had not turned it into a death world. They had turned it into a lesson. And the Vakun were failing it. Karek had always trusted convergence. Across every campaign, every engagement, Vakun predictive models narrowed toward certainty. Variables collapsed. Outcomes clarified. Victory was not guessed, it was calculated. Now the projections refused to settle. Thousands of simulations ran in parallel, each diverging further than the last. Some showed decisive Vakun triumph within hours. Others spiraled into cascading failure without a single catastrophic blow. None agreed on how. That is unacceptable, Korek said quietly. The system is saturated with adaptive noise, replied the chief modeler. The humans are not reacting to us uniformly. Each response alters the environment just enough to invalidate the previous assumption. Korek turned from the display and paced the chamber. His kind was born on crushing worlds where hesitation meant death. Decisiveness was survival. Control was safety. Yet every attempt to impose control here increased instability. On oath, Admiral Hale studied the same divergence with grim focus. They are reaching the point of forced decision. Vargas nodded. Their doctrine can't tolerate ambiguity. They'll escalate or withdraw. And either choice costs them, Shaw added. A warning chimed through the human command center. One of the inner system habitats had gone dark. Not destroyed, disabled. Power stripped away, with surgical precision. Civilian casualties remained low, but the message was clear. They are pressing, Shaw said. Hard. Hale's jaw tightened. As expected. The human reply was not military. It was logistical. Across Sol, energy reserves rerouted. Old protocols activated. Civilian infrastructure shifted roles without fanfare. Shipping schedules rewrote themselves. Networks that had never been designed for war quietly became part of one. To the public, it looked like rationing. To the Vakun, it looked like defiance. Korek observed the changes with mounting irritation. They bleed efficiency, he said. They accept internal disorder to deny us advantage. That is not rational, Anade said. No, Korek replied. It is experienced. Another report arrived. Strategist, fleet fuel consumption has increased by 12%. Cost corrections and micro-adjustments are compounding. Korek froze. Fuel inefficiency was a problem of prolonged conflict, not decisive invasion. How long until it becomes critical? The analyst hesitated. At this rate, sooner than planned. Korek returned to the tactical display and made a choice. Authorize Operation Cleansing Wave, he said. Several officers stiffened. That protocol was reserved for breaking entrenched Deathworld defenses. Massive energy dispersals meant to overwhelm environments entirely. It will destabilize the system further, one warned. Yes, Korek said. But it will force an outcome. The order propagated instantly. Vakun vessels aligned, charging emitters that bent local spacetime into lethal harmonics. The buildup alone distorted sensors across the system. On Earth, alarms fled. Vargas inhaled sharply. They are going all in. Hale's voice was steady. Then so do we. Phase 2. Shaw asked. Hale nodded once. Release the discretion limits. Across Sol, something changed, not visibly, but fundamentally. Human commanders at every level received the same message, phrased simply. Authority delegated. Act on intent. There were no detailed orders. No step-by-step plans. Just trust. Small defense groups began acting independently. Not randomly, purposefully. Some retreated, drawing Vakun assets deeper. Others surged forward briefly, forcing weapon discharges at inopportune moments. Data feeds fed the alien models exactly what they expected to see, until they didn't. The cleansing wave discharged. Energy tore through space, washing across prepared vectors. It struck empty corridors, wasted power on deliberately abandoned positions, and destabilized gravitational pockets the humans had already vacated. The effect was dramatic and inefficient. Damage assessment. Korek demanded. Minimal confirmed destruction, came the reply. System instability increased significantly. Korek's claws curled slowly. They moved. Yes. They knew. They anticipated the timing window. Silence filled the chamber. For the first time, the realization crystallized fully. The humans were not reacting faster. They were planning further ahead. Beneath the Pacific, Hale watched the wave dissipate and allowed himself a slow breath. They spent their strength, he said. Vargas checked the metrics. Fleet strain just crossed the threshold. Shaw's expression hardened. Then they are vulnerable. Not yet, Hale replied. They still think vulnerability means destruction. In the Vacuum fleet, minor failures began to accumulate. Shield harmonics desynchronized. Cooling systems strained. Nothing fatal. Nothing dramatic. Just enough. Korek stared at the numbers and felt something unfamiliar settle into his core. This was not a battlefield. It was an argument. And the humans were winning it by refusing to fight the way they were supposed to. Strategist, an aide said softly, if this continues. I know, Korek interrupted. Withdrawal would preserve his fleet. Persistence might break it. And for the first time in his long career, Korek could not calculate which choice was worse. Far across the void, humanity waited. Not for victory, for understanding. Because once the Vacuum truly understood what they were facing, the war would change forever. Korek did not sleep. Vacuum strategists rarely did during active operations, but this was different. His mind replayed projections that refused to settle, probabilities that blurred instead of sharpening. The humans had turned uncertainty into a weapon, and it ignored him. Status, he ordered. The response came immediately. Fleet integrity holding at 93%. Operational efficiency down another 4 points. Fuel projections revised. How long, Korek asked, until attrition exceeds acceptable parameters? A pause. Too long. At current trends, within 12 cycles. 12 cycles was nothing. Not in doctrine. Not for a force designed to end wars before inefficiency mattered. Korek's mandibles tightened. The humans were not trying to destroy his fleet. They were trying to age it. On oath, Admiral Hale studied the same curves with quiet focus. They are feeling it now. Vargas nodded. Their command culture assumes short wars. Every inefficiency compounds faster than they expect. Shaw glanced at a secondary display. Independent actions increasing. Our people are pushing the limits. That's the point, Hale replied. They don't need permission. They need purpose. Purpose spread quickly. A human defense group near Jupiter deliberately exposed a resupply convoy, broadcasting just enough signal leakage to be noticed. The Vacuum struck with precision, eliminating the convoy in a clean, efficient engagement. Moments later, their sensors registered the consequences. The convoy had been rerouted through a debris corridor seeded days earlier. The Vacuum ships navigated it flawlessly, until microfractures began appearing along shield emitters, stressed by constant recalibration. No single impact caused damage. Thousands of them did. Localized shield degradation, an officer reported. Minor. Korek said nothing, but marked the pattern. Elsewhere, human craft executed feints that ended just short of engagement range, forcing Vacuum gunners to power weapons repeatedly without discharge. Energy bled away. Heat built up. Cooling cycles lengthened. Each tactic was trivial alone. Together, they formed rhythm. They are forcing us to act, Korek said slowly. On their timing. Yes, strategist. That is unacceptable. He authorized targeted strikes against command nodes, human installations likely coordinating these actions. The attacks were precise, devastating, and largely successful. The effect lasted minutes. Then the pattern resumed, unchanged. They did not stop, an aide said. Command elimination had no measurable effect. Korek's gaze hardened. They are not centralized. No, they fight like an ecosystem, Korek murmured. On oath, Vargas smiled thinly. His learning. Learning costs time, Hale said. And time costs them more than us. Another alert chimed. A human station had failed catastrophically under Varcoon fire. Evacuation incomplete. Losses confirmed. The room went quiet. Hale closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, his voice was firm. Log it. Notify families. We do not hide the cost. Shaw nodded. They'll press harder. Yes, Hale agreed. Because they think pain will break us. It never had. The next human action surprised even their own analysts. A group of independent commanders deliberately abandoned a fortified region, withdrawing assets and leaving a clear corridor toward the inner system. To the Varcoon, it looked like collapse. Karek seized the opportunity. Advance, he ordered. Exploit. The fleet surged forward, regaining confidence as resistance thinned. Fuel consumption stabilized. Weapon discharge efficiency improved. Relief rippled through the command chamber. Then the corridor closed. Gravitational anchors, long hidden, powered by repurposed civilian infrastructure, activated behind the advancing elements. Not strong enough to trap ships outright. Just strong enough to limit maneuverability. Human forces did not attack. They observed. The Varcoon ships attempted to adjust formation. Latency spiked. Synchronization faltered. Strategist, an analyst said, voice tight, our re-elements are struggling to rejoin. Karek stared at the display. We were invited. Yes. This was consent, Karek said, understanding dawning. They wanted us, eh? On oath, Vargas leaned forward. They crossed the line. Not yet, Hale said. We did. A new message went out to the Varcoon fleet. Not a demand. Not a threat. A statement. You are operating inside an environment optimized against centralized force. Continued advance will degrade your fleet beyond recovery. Withdrawal remains an option. Karek read it twice. They advise us, an aide said incredulously. They warn us, Karek corrected. His fleet was still powerful, still lethal, but now constrained, aging, and increasingly predictable. He realized then what the humans had done. They had not challenged his strength. They had challenged his assumptions. Prepare contingency withdrawal routes, Karek ordered quietly. Several officers froze. Strategist. I will not lose a fleet to pride, he said. Not to these humans. As preparations began, one final report arrived. Strategist, additional human forces are repositioning. Not to attack. To observe. Karek looked at the Sol system one last time. The humans were not celebrating. They were not rushing to finish him. They were waiting to see if he understood the lesson. For the first time since the invasion began, Karek felt something close to respect. And something far closer to fear. Because if humanity could fight like this while holding back, what would happen when they stopped?